Hello, everybody, and welcome to our presentation today on the case of Golden Jubilants using a prototype to support healthcare technology research. And this paper was co-authored with Bilal, Ahmad, the PhD student on the project, Sarah Beecham, and myself, Richardson. We did this within the Lero Research Centre and also in collaboration with the Aging Research Centre at the University of Limerick. So today I want to talk about the development of the recommendations that we did. So here what we're interested in is how, if somebody is developing smartphone applications for older adults, what should be included or what should they take into account for that without worrying about the particular functions of the smartphone. And as well as this, then, I want to talk about the future use of prototypes, really summarising the learnings that we had out of doing this project. So here I'm just showing you the demographics of the older adults in Ireland from the year 2000 onwards. And we can see that the numbers have been growing consistently. The lowest age group here is 50, so we have actually taken 50 as the lower end of the older adult age group, and this has been based on other research that's been done internationally. And while we have this growth in the older adult population, growth in the market, growth in the need, we have found through our research that older adults are actually underserved by technological solutions, and that indeed includes software solutions. So our research question for this project was, what are the recommendations that need to be considered by practitioners, so that's also software engineers, to make applications usable and accessible for older adults? So in doing this, we developed ReDeep, which is developing smartphone applications for an aging population. And what I'm showing here is a subset of ReDeep. And within that, you can see that there are two goals: usability and accessibility. And if we look at the lower levels here, we will see that there are 11 sub-goals and 44 recommendations. So I'm showing two of the sub-goals here, useful and valuable, and highlighting what we mean when we say a recommendation. Now, showing a recommendation in this one sentence format is not particularly useful. So using software design patterns, we actually have described 44 recommendations using design patterns, and this particular one, use consistent and explicit step-by-step navigation and user interface elements in the application. We talk about the problem, the rationale, the solution, type, subtype, any other related patterns, and references where we found information about this. So for the 44 recommendations, we developed patterns for each of them. So to do this, Bilal, the PhD student, undertook a full research project. So this just summarises that there were 4 stages within that project. And within that, so the third stage of that project is around full prototype development. And you can just see that again, there are a number of sub-phases here, and within that, various tasks. So this was quite a detailed project that we actually worked on. So what did we find out about it from using prototypes? And I want to talk about these under 4 different headings: public and patient involvement, available tools and techniques, the development of a needed and tangible prototype, and the involvement of other stakeholders. So first of all, public and patient involvement is a technique that is used very much and is growing within the healthcare area. So I do think that if we are involved in healthcare research, we really do need to think about how do we bring in PPI. So what does PPI mean? It means that the research is carried out with or by members of the public, rather than what would very often happen in a research project. We work, we go out, we figure things out about people, we develop things for people. So instead of doing that, we're actually working very, very closely with them. And this actually means bringing non-researcher stakeholders from the research design stage right through the research project, helping on the design of the project, helping the development of questionnaires, and giving feedback on research stages. So it's actually bringing the stakeholder in at that stage. And what happens then is that the research outcome actually improves. So really what we should be doing is thinking about how can we integrate PPI in our future research. And not on this project, but I have actually worked with older adults now in the development of research design for particular projects that have been happening during the time of COVID, and very, very important to get them involved right from the start. The second thing we wanted to talk about is around available tools and techniques. So if we're doing interdisciplinary research, we really should be trying to take from the pool of techniques that are available in other areas. So just a couple of examples of what we use: system usability scale, which is very much used within systems engineering. We did our evaluation using Convex Alpha, which comes from statistics. And then, of course, we use the design patterns from our own discipline. So important that those tools and techniques are used when they are available. So we need to be looking more broadly at our bag of tools, really. Furthermore, in developing a prototype and in, I suppose, bringing in a group to evaluate through the use of a prototype, it is really important that that prototype is something in which the user group would be interested. So we wanted to develop the recommendations. We have found that prototyping was an invaluable method when we were doing this, but we really stood back and considered what would the value of the prototype be to the user group. So it wasn't just about developing a piece of software that we thought would be useful. We really considered what we were trying to do. And one of the aims that we had really considered was around social isolation and how do we decrease social isolation. And we felt that, and again, talking to people, not in the PPI manner, but using them as part of our research group, we're getting information from them. We started to think about volunteering, that people could become volunteers in their communities if there could be matched with particular interests in the area. So we investigated the OA interests and we developed a prototype that actually ensured engagement from the OAs. So what was the premise for the development here? One is that social networking services, have been seen, and the literature shows that they have helped to overcome social isolation. And I suppose we've very much seen in the last 12 to 15 months with the pandemic how useful SMSs have been to older people and to keeping them in touch, and indeed to others. So the problem is that the uptake by older adults is low. Why is this? Because there are privacy issues, because they don't know or understand how to use them, because they find difficulty to operate them, and do not have a lack of purpose for using them. So we were trying to overcome this in our prototype. So the volunteering system was really around helping socially isolated older adults to become part of the community again and to increase the value to their community. So we wanted to provide solutions around the prototyping. So we developed Golden Jubilants, and here are just a couple of the screens just to show you this is what it actually looks like. So involving other stakeholders, IBM was our industry partner, so we were able to get input from those with technical expertise, and actually having an expert group input broadened our thinking, so it brought in a different aspect, brought in a bit more diversity into what we were doing. So in conclusion, we had collaboration with an interested user group. We did get strong and useful outcomes. We have another project going, which is looking at recommendations for health information systems for clients with mild intellectual and developmental disability, and we presented a paper on that work last year. Prototyping in and of itself provides a level of objectivity, which is very useful to the research, and overall, prototyping can help provide excellent outcomes for the type of healthcare research that we are interested in. And so to conclude, just to say that we want to acknowledge our sponsors and funders, and thank you. funders.
All right. Seem to be live. That's wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ita, for that presentation. That was very interesting view of the importance of prototyping and a dedicated framework for targeting a particular population in healthcare, particularly elderly. I was wondering, so I'll kick it off with a few questions and see what comes in.
Yeah.
So you started with a subset of the goals, like the 2 goals and sub goals of your model there. I was wondering, was there a particular quality framework that you base these goals and sub goals on, or was that solicited based on your literature analysis?
I suppose we started out by saying, we had to think about the older adults, and we had to narrow it down into some of the quality, the quality environment. And of course, we could have gone for lots of things like reliability, for example, or performance, whatever. But we decided that because we were focusing on the user, because we were focusing on the older adult, we would go for usability and accessibility. So then when we were doing our surveys and our interviews, it was with that focus in mind. So even though we would have collected data through the interviews, and did analysis on the data, it was on those 2 that we were focusing on. And really what we were interested was the sub factors of those we were interested in getting to.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When I looked at the example of the recommendation of the pattern that you, I was wondering. I mean, okay, maybe I'm getting into that category already, that target category. But I was wondering, well, everything here makes sense even for younger people.
Yes.
So, is there potentially some sort of an analysis, or maybe that's also future work about what other goals may younger folks have that may conflict a little bit with some of these goals that are more emphasized for the older population? Have you done some sort of a trade-off analysis there already, or is that something that you...
No, we haven't done the trade-off. I suppose, and I mentioned at the start of the presentation about being involved with the Aging Research Centre. So I suppose the focus of the work has been with the older adult. We also, which isn't particularly mentioned in this, it's mentioned a little, that we actually had done work. Part of the work was with IBM, so they gave they were involved in part of the work as well, and they were particularly interested in the older adults. So I suppose that was where our focus was. So therefore, we haven't gone to the younger adult. And I suppose part of that as well is that, when we look at maybe our own students and the people who are developing, in a way, they are those people. And a lot of the time, even though many, many older adults, including you and I, of course, are very au fait with technology, and we've been involved in the development of systems, so we do understand what requirements are about. But it's trying to make sure that when people are doing that development, that they are thinking about the older adult. And I suppose even that debate that we would have had at the start of the research, it doesn't come across. We say our older adult is older than 50, and we give good reasons behind it, because there are many studies that are done with adults over 50. It's a recognized number. But if you look at other studies, there are studies that have it as over 65, over 60. So even that debate as to where does the older adult fit, I mean, you're still kind of saying, is this the right cohort even to go for? And from an academic point of view, of course, we have to pick a baseline. So no, we haven't looked at the trade-offs, and I'm sure that would be something interesting. So my co-author Sarah is in the audience, so maybe that's something else that we could look at in the future. Thanks, yes.
So there's a question from Diane. Did this lead to any need to change to existing design patterns? Actually, I screwed up the question. Let me do that.
Yes, it's okay.
Any need to change to existing design patterns / techniques to better reflect older adult needs?
Okay, thanks, Diane, for that question. So if you look at how we actually, I suppose, developed the patterns, part of it was that's what we used the prototype for. It was one of the stages in the research, was to actually develop the prototype and to use both the initial work with the older adults about what the prototype should be about, but also when we were doing the studies with them afterwards to understand how they felt about the prototype before we actually made the second one. So it was the second version I actually showed in the presentation. So in that process, we were actually collecting information that was input into design patterns. So yes, there were new things that were put in because of their needs. So through the whole process, we were going through the literature, we were going through interviews with the older adults, we were going through surveys, we were looking at the prototype, and through all of that, we developed the full model that we developed. But I suppose what we were talking about today was how important it was to actually engage. We wanted to use the prototype as part of the development of the design patterns. And to do that, we had to make sure that that prototype was something in which the older adults would be interested. So there was no point in developing a prototype, hoping that people would use it, hoping that people would look at it, if we didn't actually have something in which they were interested. So that was particularly important in the prototype side. So yes, it absolutely did change, and the output is very clear from what we did with them.
Oh, great, thank you. So as a follow-up, if somebody sees this paper, the presentation, says, okay, I would like to use Redeep or the pattern catalog that you created, is it ready for other people to use already, or is this something that still?
Yeah, it's actually, sorry, apologies, I crossed you there. It's actually available as a technical report. So we actually have it available as a technical report. So I'm sure it's referenced in the paper as a technical report. It's also available. It's part of Bilal's PhD thesis, which, like any other PhD thesis in the world, is available from our library. And of course, now that we've gone online, people can access that as well. So they can see the depth behind it. But the design patterns, all 44 of them, are very clearly laid out so that people can actually look at them and use them.
Are the design patterns categorized as well under your code?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're designed under the usability and the accessibility. So again, in the diagram where we had the box and then the legs out of it with the various, those are all the individual design patterns. So it looks at things that the patterns look at things like the problem that we tried to solve, the solution to the problem. And yeah, Sarah's coming in there saying there are several design patterns ready to use. Yes. And I suppose ultimately what would be really, I suppose, again, a nice future work out of this is that we would front end it with a decision support system, for example, so that you could actually say, I'm interested in ease of use in the dark or whatever it is, and then that you would get the design patterns that would be relevant to that. So that's I suppose that's what's really nice about the design pattern structure, is that it actually structures them in such a way that we can front end them with decision support systems. Now, we haven't done that in this case, but in previous work that we've done, we've done front ends with decision support systems based on the patterns.
Are there any more questions from the audience? We have, I think, 1 minute and 50 seconds left. Otherwise, I'll create another question. I mean, I have many. Okay, I'll ask one. Yeah. So older adults, depending on their stage in life, their capabilities are not necessarily static, but they may sometimes also, decline or they transition, right? So is there some sort of potential future work that you could say, okay, maybe we're looking at the quality attributes and the patterns as something that may change over time, and then a prototype or an app gets, well, modified.
No, I think that would be a really nice way to go. And there were even some talks earlier today around dementia and cognitive decline. And obviously that's the way we've got to move things forward. But the problem that we were looking at is that there are lots of people now starting to come up with patterns for, or come up with software for use by older adults, but yet they're not thinking about really what are the sort of base level of requirements that older adults actually need.
Right.
So,
Thanks for that, Ida. So I think at this point, for the live question and answer, we only have time to thank you again. Thank you and all your co-authors.
Thank you
for this contribution. And anyone who still has a question can, of course, join the discussion area.
Okay, so I'll flick to the discussion room just in case. I doubt